Jonah was the importance of obeying God's commandments. Remember, Jonah did not do that, and he tried to escape from God's presence. Can we hide from God? No. God found him in the bottom of the boat. And then the third thing we can learn is the vastness of God's mercy. When they threw him over the ship, Jonah should have died, but he gave Jonah another chance because he has mercy upon us. So that's what I want to be teaching on today. And the Bible is always teaching us how to live. If we learn to pay attention, we can avoid a lot of hardships. Jonah had to go through a lot of hardships by learning the importance of obeying God's commandments. So the story I'm going to be sharing today will be out of Daniel. It's in the first chapter of the book. And the king of Babylon came, and it says he besieged Jerusalem. Now remember, Jerusalem was where God kept all his people. Why would he let a king like Nebuchadnezzar come in and take all his people? Well, Jehoiakim was the king of Judah at that time, and he was not obeying God. God sent the prophet Jeremiah with some warning, and it was wintertime like it is now, and it says the king was sitting by his fireplace, and when Jeremiah brought these scrolls of warnings to him, he had them read, and then he wrinkled them up and tossed them in the fire and warmed his hands. And it says, they were not afraid nor rent their garments. So they weren't scared of what God was warning them, and they didn't tear their clothes and repent like the city of Nineveh did. So God had to discipline them and teach them. So here is what he did. He allowed the king of Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, come over and besieged the whole city, and they took captives. So when the captives from Judah arrived in Babylon, King Nebuchadnezzar commanded his chief officer, "From our captives, choose the best young man." We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 good-looking men up here. The king would say, "I want all of you to come over to my house. And we're going to teach you the Amish language so you guys can speak Amish." Can you speak Amish? You're being taught. And the chief officer obeyed. The king explained that the young men were to eat food from his own table that would help them grow strong, he thought. And at the end of 3 years, they would teach these young men, they would bring these young men among the king. Now, among those chosen from the captives were Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Now, Daniel and his 3 friends wanted to keep God's law. Remember, it's number one is we have to the importance of obeying God's law, and they wanted to keep them. But when he seen that the king had brought his best meat before him, and he told his chief officer to make sure everyone gets plenty to eat. Well, these were Jews. Daniel and his 3 friends were Jews, and they were not allowed to eat certain meat like pork, and some of them were not allowed to drink wine. But the king thought this was the best. That's what he ate, and he wanted the boys to eat them. Now, what should Daniel do? Daniel and his 3 friends decided they must do what seemed right. Now, they were in a hard spot. How could they had a God, but it seemed like God forsaken them. They were in this strange land. But Daniel told the officer, "It would be wrong for us to eat the king's meat and to drink his wine. Please do not force us to do this." So there's going to be times when you children are in a hard spot. It's called peer pressure. Someone is telling you to do one thing, but your conscience is telling you, wait, the Bible says don't do this, or our parents said don't do this. And then instead of just buckling and eating the food, maybe you can say, give them an option. And this was the option that Daniel said. He said, allow us to try this food for 10 days. Allow us to try a different food that we're allowed to eat, some wholesome food. I don't want any of this meat or wine. Give us some vegetables and some water and some wholesome food so we can eat and drink that. And the chief officer said, well, listen, the king put me in charge, and if you boys get sick or die, he's going to come after me. And Daniel said, just give me 10 days. All I want is 10 days. And if it does not work, if we look sick or pale, then we'll eat your food. But if we look better, healthier, so the officer agreed. He's like, okay, 10 days. Like I can do that for 10 days because he knew the king wouldn't see them in 3 years. So he tried it for 10 days. And at the end of those 10 days, it says, Daniel and his 3 friends looked healthier than all the others. So he could see that they were brighter, healthier, just from eating wholesome food. And he said, okay, you guys can continue to eat this food. So 3 years passed, and then the king ordered, bring all these young men to me. And when they came, he talked with them, and he asked them hard questions. And Daniel and his 3 friends were 10 times wiser than the wisest men of his kingdom. So no wonder Nebuchadnezzar was pleased with these young Jews, and he gave them places of honor, and they lived in Babylon for many years. So the story continues in chapter 2, where one night King Nebuchadnezzar had a very strange dream. When he awoke, he was so troubled he could not go back to sleep. Do you children ever have nightmares and you can't go back to sleep? Sometimes we have to come up and comfort you and pray with you. But this dream was so unusual that he decided it must have a deep meaning. So in the morning he thought, I'll call all my wise men and they can explain the dream to him. But guess what? The morning came, King Nebuchadnezzar woke up and he couldn't remember what he dreamed. He knew when he woke up after his dream that it was very important, and he knew that he wanted to know the meaning of it, but he couldn't remember what he dreamed. Does that ever happen to you guys? Happens to me. I'm like, whoa, that was so good. Someone woke me up and I can't remember what it was. So now he was even more troubled than before. It was too important of a dream to forget. So he sent for all his wise men. They came and he said, I've had a very strange dream. I want someone to tell it to me. The wise men said, well, sure, tell me your dream and we'll tell you what it means. But the king said, you don't understand. I forgot the dream, and you guys are supposed to be smart enough to tell you my dream and then tell you what it means. The wise men said, we're not that smart. Only God knows what you dream. And the king said, I've trained you guys. You're supposed to be smarter than that. All you want is to buy time. So he said, I'll give you. He didn't give him much time. I don't know how much time. Let's say he didn't give him much time. He said, if you don't explain the dream to me in this amount of time, all you wise men are going to die because you're worthless to me if you can't tell me what the dream means. Now his officers went and they were gathering up all the wise men to get them in one spot and kill them because no one could tell the dream. And among those wise men were who? Daniel and his 3 friends. And they had not heard what the king had said. So when the officer came to get Daniel and put him in handcuffs, he said, wait a minute, why are you doing this? He said, well, the king had a dream and no one knows what it is. So I'm handcuffing you, taking you off to jail. And Daniel said, well, let me go talk to the king because I didn't hear about this. So he went and talked to Nebuchadnezzar and he said, give me a little bit of time tonight and hopefully I can tell you what this dream meant. He was the only one that could give the king some hope. So the king agreed. And at once, Daniel hurried back to his 3 friends and told them about his agreement. And even though no person was wise enough to tell the king's dream, God knew about it, and earnestly the 4 prayed for God's help. So they got down on their knees, they started praying, and here's where God shows his mercy. They prayed that they would desire the mercies of the God of heaven concerning this secret. So God said, sure, I can show you these mercies. And that night, Daniel went to sleep, and God showed him the dream. So quickly, he rose up, and he went to the captain of the guard and said, wait, don't kill anyone today. God showed me the dream. And he brought Daniel before the king and said, I have found a man among the captives of Judah who would tell you about your dream. And Daniel told Nebuchadnezzar, the secret you want to know, no man could tell you. He's like, there's no man in here wise enough to tell you about your dream. But there is a God in heaven who knows all secrets, and he has told me about your dream. And so the king listened closely, And Daniel said, "O king, when you went to bed, you wondered what would happen in the future. You fell asleep, and God showed you what would happen. You saw a great bright image of a man. The head was made of gold, the chest and arms of silver, the waist and hips of brass, the legs of iron, and the feet were part clay and iron." Then he continued, "You saw a stone. It was moved not by hands, and it rolled against the feet, and the stone broke the feet, and the whole image broke to the ground into all different pieces. And the pieces were so fine like dust, the wind blew them away, and when you watched, a great mountain became of this little stone." Then the king nodded. He remembered this was exactly what he dreamed. But what did all this mean? That was a strange dream. So Daniel said, "God showed me, and he wants me to tell you what this means." He said, "The great image, the head of gold, that represents your kingdom right now. You're a great king. You have a great kingdom. But another kingdom of a lesser king represents the chest of arms and silver. The third kingdom is shown by the parts of brass. The fourth kingdom is the legs of iron and feet. And at first, this fourth kingdom will be very strong, but it will become weaker as shown by the iron and clay feet." Then Daniel said, "God will set up a kingdom that will never be destroyed." Can you kids think of a kingdom of a king not made by hands that will come and overtake all these other kingdoms? Who would that be? God, or who's God's king going to set upon a throne more specifically? Jesus, exactly. So he said, "This is the meaning of your dream." He said, "This kingdom that was blown away and the mountain took its place will fill up the whole earth." And Nebuchadnezzar was amazed how wise Daniel was. Perhaps the king thought Daniel was a god because he bowed down to him, and Daniel reminded him, no, God told me your dream. Bow down to him. So Nebuchadnezzar said, "Surely your God is a God of gods, a Lord of kings, and a revealer of many secrets." So to Daniel, the king gave many great gifts and made him a ruler over all the land of Babylon. From that time on, Daniel was the head of all the wise men in the kingdom. And rightly so. He was wiser than all of men because he had God on his side. So Daniel was raised up higher than these men, and at Daniel's request, his three friends were also moved up. They were in the government, and Daniel was higher. Now, this king continued to grow in power because in Daniel's dream, he said, "You're the head of gold, and you have a lot of power." Well, that went to King Nebuchadnezzar's head, and he had this gold statue made. It was 90 foot tall, covered in gold to represent his kingdom. And he became proud of this, and he told all the people in the land that you have to come. And he set it out in the middle of a plain, in the middle of a desert where everyone could see it. He said, "You have to come down and bow down to this idol." So first, it says everyone was supposed to come. The princes, they came. There were a lot of princes. And then the governors, they came. There were a lot of governors. And rulers, treasurers, the consulars, the sheriff, everyone had to come and bow down to this idol. And when the music played is when they were supposed to bow down. Now remember, Daniel's three friends were in the government, so they were there, and all that were in the land at one time or another had to come and bow down to this. Now, there were certain Chaldeans that did not like Daniel and his three friends because they were moved up in position and they were smarter. And what happens? Jealousy sets in. So when they were all supposed to bow down to this king, when we're sitting at the supper table and I say, "Kids, let's say prayers," what are we supposed to do? We all close our eyes and someone prays. Well, this was what they were supposed to be doing. Everyone was supposed to bow down. And if everyone would have bowed down, nobody would have noticed that the three friends stood standing. But there were a couple Chaldeans there, and they were jealous. And they knew that they served a different God. And they said, "I bet they're not going to bow down." So they stood back and they watched. And sure enough, Daniel's three friends did not bow down. What did they do? They ran to the king and said, "Didn't you order a decree that when the music plays, that everyone is supposed to bow down? And the king said, of course I did. That's a great idol representing me and my kingdom. Everyone must bow. And they said, there are 3 people called Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego that did not bow down. And the king said, have them ordered to come see me at once. And when they came, the king liked these Jews because they were smarter than everyone else. And he said, maybe you guys didn't understand my decree. Maybe like the first time, you guys didn't hear what I said when Daniel came to me. Did you understand that I said when the music plays that everyone has to bow? Now, I'll give you a second chance, but I need you guys to bow. Now, his commandment, if you make a rule and you don't back it up, then a lot of times people don't obey. And his rule was he had a fire going, and to back it up, to make sure everyone obeys, he said, if you do not bow down, then you will be thrown into this fire. So they said, oh, we heard you, king, but we are not going to bow down. They said, we have a God up in heaven that we serve, and we trust him today that he will save us. But even if he does not save us, even if you throw us into this fire and we burn, we will still trust in him. And this made the king so mad because he was giving them a second chance. He ordered his officers to come. He said, I've heard enough. Handcuff these guys up. Actually, go make the fire 7 times hotter, he said. He was so mad. King Nebuchadnezzar had a terrible temper. And he made them make the fire 7 times hotter. Now, I still do not understand they were a lot of wise men, and I still don't understand how they made the fire 7 times hotter, or if they just made it 7 times bigger. I don't know, but I know if you create the right kind of oxygen, like I have blowtorches at home, and I can put a piece of steel just on the fire in the wood stove and it won't melt. But if I take them blowtorches, I can blow a hole right through them. So there are ways you can make fire hotter. And these officers grabbed these 3 prisoners, took them over, and threw them into this fire. And the fire was so hot that the officers died, fell down after they threw them in. They fell down. There, king was sitting there watching. I could just see him get a smirk on his face. All his trouble was gone, he thought. Everyone was going to bow down now. They were dead. They were in the fire, gone. But all of a sudden, he seen movement in the fires. The flame probably flickered down a bit. And he looked, and he called his other people, and he said, didn't we just throw 3 people in there? They said, yeah. He said, well, there's 4 in there, and the 4th one looks like the Son of Man. He said, it looks like Jesus himself. And he said, Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, would you guys step back outside? And they stepped back outside. Where did I put the 3? And there was not a hair singed on their head. There was nothing wrong except the ropes that they had tied around their hands. That was the only thing that burned off of them. And the king was amazed. He said, he was then afraid to be angry. All his anger was gone. And he believed that they were great men and that he must honor them. Surely they served a great God, one who had all power. This God has power over fire, he has all power. And he said, blessed is your God. He took care of you because you trusted in him. And because you have not worshipped an idol, he said, because you worship the true God, you have changed my commandment. The king actually changed his commandment right then and there. He said, I decree that anyone in any nation who speaks against this God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, if you guys speak against them again, because remember, these friends were watching them and spoke against them and got them in trouble because they were jealous. He said, if you speak against them again, then your house will be destroyed. And King Nebuchadnezzar gave these three men higher places in the kingdom. So he kept moving these guys up. So the 3 points we want to learn from these three friends. Number one, God says, obey his commandments. He commanded them not to bow down to idols, not to eat that food. And even though it was hard, they trusted God. And if you trust God, you won't try to escape his presence. They said, whether he saves us today or not, we will still trust him. And then you will become in the vastness of God's mercy. He had mercy. He didn't let them get burned. He protected them, and he showed him his mercy. And through all that, the people knew that there is one God, and they said, blessed is the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And that's the same God today, tomorrow, and forever. So we can still trust in him and keep his commandments. So that's my goal, my lesson for you guys today. You're dismissed.